Okay, so let me call this meeting of the Transit Service Delivery Advisory Committee to order. I'm John McGlennon. I chair TSDAC, and I am representative of the Virginia Association of Counties, member of the James City County Board of Supervisors. I know our vice chair, Cindy Mester, is not able to be with us today. Would the other members please just identify themselves?
Yeah, Jim Dyke, DRPT representative.
Thanks, Jim.
I'm
Kate?
Kate Mattice. I'm with the Northern Virginia Transportation Commission, but I'm representing the Virginia Transit Association.
Okay. Brian?
I'm Brian Booth. I'm with Blacksburg Transit, and I'm representing the Community Transportation Association of Virginia.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Noelle Pinkard, and I'm with Hampton Roads Transit, and I'm a VTA member as well.
And Noel, you're our new member.
I am new. Thank you
right?
so much.
Thank you for joining us.
Welcome aboard.
We wish Sam Sink the very best, but she was a very valuable member of this committee. I'm sure you will be as well.
Thank you.
I don't know if Mr. Smoot, he would be the other one, sir, I guess. I don't know that he has joined or if he's planning on attending, so I guess if he hasn't spoken up, he may not be here, so.
Jamie
Okay.
Jackson, Fredericksburg Regional
Jamie,
Transit.
yes.
Serve as the
Jamie.
Director of Transit and Transportation, representing the state, DRPT.
Hey,
Great.
Jamie.
Thank you, Jamie. And any other members of the committee? If not, Zach, would you have the staff introduce themselves? They're going to be participating today.
Sure. Grant, if you want to go ahead, and then anybody else that's speaking, I'll kind of defer to y'all just to go down with us. See Grant, so he popped in mind first.
Sure. Good afternoon, everybody. Grant Sparks. I'm the Director of Statewide Transit Programs, DRPT.
I think Andy, if you want to go next.
Yeah. I'm Andy Wright. I am the Chief of External Affairs and Strategic Initiatives here.
And if Jen wants to say something, she was going to kind of be in and out, but I won't put her on the spot. But she was in for a minute, so if she wants to say hello, certainly we'll give her a second to do that if you don't mind, Mr.
Yes, sir.
Chair. But she may be detained again real quick. So, Jen, you out there? All right. She may pipe up in a minute. I think that's all of our staff that are going to speak, sir.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Zach. That's fine. So our first item of business today is the approval of the March 3rd, 2023 meeting. Does anybody have any corrections or amendments they'd like to have made in the minutes? If not, do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Okay, we have a motion to approve and seconded. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
And all those opposed, say nay. Sounds like we passed the minutes. Thank you very much. And thank you to everybody for taking time out today to be here. I'm watching freshmen scurrying around campus trying to find classes they can enroll in, but it gives me a nice break here. We're now going to move on to Grant. I think you're going to handle the next item on the agenda, which is the review of the Virginia transit data, which had some good news in it. Yeah.
Yes. So thank you, and good afternoon again. If you can flip to the next slide, please. So it's not often that we come to you guys with transit ridership data, but because our operating program incorporates performance metrics, and we just completed a fiscal year, we thought it would be a good opportunity to provide the TSDAC group with just an update on where we stand with transit ridership recovery from the pandemic. So what you see here on the screen, and I'll just quickly describe what you're looking at. This is transit ridership by fiscal year. The middle bars are WMATA ridership, and that's bus, heavy rail, and their paratransit service for Virginia. On the right, you have VRE's ridership. And then on the left, you have everyone that's not WMATA or VRE. So it's everyone else. And so the story is similar across all three groups. As you can see, the Virginia agencies, which again does not include WMATA or VRE, has recovered quicker than WMATA and VRE. And we're approaching those FY20 levels, which is obviously great to see. WMATA is also recovering at a pretty good clip. They still have some work to do there, but we were very encouraged with their ridership growth in FY23. And the same goes for VRE. VRE was probably in the biggest hole, and I know we spent a lot of time last year talking about VRE and the challenges that they face. But all is to say, we were very encouraged with their ridership growth as well. So really, we just wanted to show you guys what the final numbers were now that we've closed out FY23. And I'm happy to take any questions that the group may have.
All right. Does anybody have any questions for Grant on this particular slide? I guess I'd just ask Grant one thing, and that is, obviously overall we're doing great, making great strides toward recovery of ridership. But I'm curious as to whether, how much variation there is from agency to agency.
There is certainly some variation in the agencies that we highlighted last year that are growing way faster, I guess, than the others. GRTC is I think still the leader in that category. Their ridership continues to grow. But I'd say the vast majority of agencies are just following this trend. It's a steady but somewhat slow increase in ridership back to those pre-pandemic levels. But really, yeah, the outlier is, from what I remember, and if anybody from DRPT is on the line that has better information here, please feel free to interject. But I do recall GRTC as being the fastest grower. And then we still see those agencies that are lagging behind a little. VRE is obviously one of them. And thank you, Todd. You reminded me that Dash in Alexandria is also a quick grower. So they're on right in there with GRTC. But the ones that have been a little bit slower to recover, I remember Loudoun County, we talked about them a little bit. We talked about Radar. We talked about GLTC in Lynchburg. And these were agencies that had some loss in service that fell in line with the pandemic, but it was somewhat out of their control. They had lost some service contracts. Radar had lost the contract with Roanoke County. GLTC had lost the contract with Liberty University. And so it's still those same players that are a little bit slower to recover because they lost service. So I don't think any trends have drastically changed since we last touched base on that.
Okay, thank you very much, Grant. Anybody else have any questions?
Mr. Chair, this is Jamie. I just had a question about what that looks like, or if you have any graphics. Obviously, I don't need you to show them now, Grant. For those who have gone fare-free versus those who have not, do you see? I know there's a correlation, so that's obvious. But is there a greater increase? Because in Fredericksburg, we have had significant ridership, and I think it's because of fare-free. But can you either speak to that anecdotally or give any feedback to if any of the fare-free agencies have had challenges with growth despite just anything you can speak to because of that, because we appreciate the program DRPT has offered.
Yes, that's a really good point, Jamie. And I noticed not too long ago, I was looking at your ridership in Fredericksburg and specifically looking at your trip, Grant, when you guys went fare-free, and then looked at your ridership data and noticed a significant bump since you guys went to a zero fare model. And that does hold true, I think, for many of the other agencies that have gone to zero or reduced fare. Off the top of my head, I know that Mountain Empire Transit, that they're they're doing quite well, and they're a zero fare model. Dash, obviously, I mentioned earlier, they're doing quite well. GRTC, Fairfax Q, also the city of Fairfax, they're doing well with their zero fare. And so I would say that there is definitely a correlation with those who have either been able to maintain zero fare after the pandemic or just started zero fare, that those agencies generally are seeing better ridership because of it.
Great. Okay, well, I suppose the biggest piece of news that we picked up this summer is that when Taylor Swift comes to town, she brings a lot of people to public transit and pays some money for it, and Beyonce as well. So
Beyonce as well.
maybe that's our strategy going forward.
There you go.
Thank you. Anybody else have any questions for Grant? If not, we'll move on to the third item on our agenda, which is the fiscal year 24 6-year improvement program review, and that's Zach.
Thank you, Chairman Glenn. Yeah, we've really looked at most of this information back when we met earlier in the spring. So we just wanted to review it real quick to let you know where it shook out in June, and it stuck pretty close to where we were. So I think we were pretty pleased. So next one, Mary Olivia. So this was sort of the high level where things came out. We were able to award $133 million in operating assistance, capital of over $100 million, and then some of our other programs, TRIP, we allocated $26 million. That's one of our newer programs. So managed to keep a lot of things going that have been going the last few years since the funding model in the state changed, including being able to give hopefully some significant funding that keeps WMATA able to provide for that area up there that Kate and them work real closely with. So we continue to work very closely with them to try to make sure we can can assist as able. So any questions about that slide? That's sort of a large part of it. I don't think anything stood out to anybody in large. All right, next slide. So on the capital side, we had showed you this too, sort of stayed true to this, that we looked back in the spring. We feel like we have continued to invest in state of good repair, which was our, really the goal of the program when it came down to really what we wanted. So, but also assist in some other capital projects, facilities, vehicles, things like that, for expansion, or and other things. So okay, next slide. I mean, that last slide, and this will get a little bit more into it too. So we were able to fund a large majority of projects, which we love, and the ones that we didn't fund really, they just weren't even, and they were kind of on the eligibility of funding. So we believe where the funding was needed, we're able to apply it there. This is state of good repair. As you see, over 95% of the projects are were to vehicles. All but 10 of the projects we were able to fund, and again, the ones that we didn't were really because they weren't even at their useful life yet. So next slide, Mary Olivia. And then in minor enhancements, again, those things that come in for expansion or other things outside of just state of good repair. We were able to fund a large majority of those too, thankfully. So over 100 projects out of 128. So you can kind of see where that goes. I mean, some of the IT projects and things like that are always increasing in importance, as we know, so keeping those up. Okay, next one. And the major expansions, that's the opposite. We don't get a whole lot of those, and so when we can do them, the VRE project was kind of one that came up, and that's been a good one for us. We were able to kind of provide what we sometimes refer to as closeout funding. This was an important project for being able to extend out VRE to the out to the Manassas area. Manassas Park was working on a project. This is really going to improve some multimodal options out there. So it was good that we ourselves and VRE and the city were able to sort of make that connection during the funding and grant cycle, so that we could put some money in to help close out that project. So that's being put to good use, and that'll be money that goes out and put back in the economy rather quickly, which we're happy about. And Winchester also, we were proud to participate in that as a small agency. They are in sore need of a new facility. So So that's something we're working closely with them on as well. And so they'll have that funding from this year. So keep going. Okay, next slide. Was there any questions about the capital ones we just saw? Does everybody anything? Not too much
Zach,
different.
I should know, but remind me of the one major expansion project that was not funded.
Sorry. Great question. It was just it was one from Hampton Roads Transit that they're working on a new South Side facility, and we're just working with them to make sure that the timing is going to be right, and that we really don't put funding on it maybe when they need to do some more preparation. So that was one about $25 million worth that we decided not to fund this year. So yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
So then the operating assistance, which having formerly been with an operator, is nice. I mean, it's something that the state and DRPT do that provides a nice foundation for agencies while they are able to raise money for their own operating. So again, we have the 30% cap. You can see where some of that played versus where we were in 21. We still are kind of in some ways looking at that pre-pandemic. We're steadily moving out of that, but you asked about sometimes where more ridership is or where people were spending more money, and that does play into the operating assistance formula. But so these are some of the larger agencies here that you see. So next slide is a few more of the some of them are large, but some of these are the smaller agencies. So as you can see, in 24 we were actually able to give more because we had some of that funding that was coming from the federal government, and then just general inflation and how that was playing into our funding streams provided us some more money that we were able to apply towards the 24 operating assistance allocation. So that's why you can see that agencies, we're still kept in a good position for that. So again, thank you to all the work by TSDAC in the past and some of the funding changes to allow us to continue to do this. We'll have to remind everybody continuously come fiscal year 25 that some of these 24 numbers were because of a one-time boost in funding. So that'll be a little challenge going into next year, where things we'll talk about it later will probably return a little bit more back to normal. So next one. So there's where we talked about where some actually went down in 24, but it was really due to some forces they couldn't control, and so VRE did a huge drop off. Talked about Lynchburg with Liberty not working anymore, Loudoun County with commuters. So where there were reductions, they were able to be explained, and some of it was outside of their control. But it does play into our formula and how that works, and we do think that is the strength of it. That if you're not providing as much service, it's not going to you're not going to be in line for as much funding, which makes sense. So okay, next one. All right, so I think this is sir, I'll turn it back over to you. I think that was all on that. If y'all have any more questions about how fiscal year 24 played out, I know that's a quick overview.
Any questions from anyone?
This is Jamie, Mr. Chair. I just had a quick question about the minor enhancements for the projects that didn't score well. Have you received any feedback from any of those entities that submitted projects? Because they seem, of course, like small items, but for those agencies, I don't think we submitted for those. I know we didn't submit for those, but they seem like big deals as far as work that they need or items that they need. So any thoughts on any feedback from them or changes, or is it kind of is what it is for those minor enhancements for projects that didn't score well?
I mean, Grant worked a little closer with them, or any of the program managers that are on here, maybe I'll speak to that better. I think we generally have kept an open line of communication and talked to them about it, and haven't, I don't recall that we got any real, that we left anybody out to dry, so to speak. So I do think we did okay, but I'll defer to some others, see whether they got any specific feedback. Maybe speak to that. That's a great question. Grant, did you have something to add to that?
Yeah. I mean, at least from my perspective, we didn't get any unusual comments from compared to previous years. I mean, obviously people are disappointed from time to time when they don't get something funded, but I think we've been doing the merit process now enough times that people understand that really our priority is to fund vehicle replacements. And so long as agencies are getting their vehicles replaced, those ones that are either getting ready to retire or have really already reached their useful lives, that's really has been the focus. And I think people have just come to understand that. But those things around the edges, those smaller projects, I personally, I didn't receive, I can't even remember any feedback this year that we got where somebody was really disappointed that one of their minor enhancements was not funded. But feel free to chime in, other DRPT staff, if you heard otherwise.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, in context of
Thanks.
the question, I don't know that it necessitated any changes. I think the program is still working pretty well. So,
Any other questions? Hearing none, we will move on then to item number 4, which is the Commonwealth Transportation Board policy updates, and that's Andy, I believe, and Zach.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members.
Hi,
of the
Andy. How are you?
committee. I'm doing well. How are you?
Doing fine, thanks.
So I'm going to walk you through some of the policy changes that have happened coming out of the session and also some changes with the CTB. Some of this will be a little bit of a repeat what you all heard in March. But if we can go to the next slide. 2 pieces of legislation that I want to talk about. The first one made changes to the Commonwealth Mass Transit Fund as it relates to the Virginia Railway Express. Specifically, it created a separate category within the transit fund of dollars that are dedicated now specifically to VRE for operating and capital expenses. It's up to 3.5% annually. The bill also provided additional CTB oversight requirements for VRE and Washington Metro.
Director of Statewide Transit Program.
And can everyone put their
Can folks in the background make sure that you're muted if you're having a conversation? Thank you.
And so I was just saying, as the bill also provided additional oversight requirements for VRE and WMATA that I will get to in more detail in a few moments. And this was one of the top transportation priorities for the governor in this past session. So moving to the next slide, there's also a bill that made some changes to the Transit Ridership Incentive Program. This program is 6% of the Commonwealth Mass Transit Fund. And prior to this legislation, the program focuses on 2 types of projects: regional connectivity in urban areas and programs throughout the state with a focus on low-income individuals. This bill added 2 new set of eligible projects to the program, one being improvements to accessibilities of transit bus passenger facilities, and a second, which is improving crime prevention and public safety for transit passengers. Just one note about that latter set of projects. When I came to speak to you in March, the bill would have added programs that would have helped with transit electrification to TRIP. The governor amended the bill in April, and the General Assembly approved the change, which switched it from transit electrification over to crime prevention type projects. This bill is a byproduct of our modernization study that we completed in 2022, and it was led by our friends over at the Virginia Transit Association. So moving to the next couple of slides, just diving into a little bit more of the specifics of these changes. Next slide, please. Changes for the Commonwealth Mass Transit Fund. So again, this created a specific commuter rail allocation within the Commonwealth Mass Transit Fund, up to 3.5% annually for operating and capital assistance that will go to NVTC for distribution to VRE. Back in July, as you'll see on the next slide, DRPT went before the Commonwealth Transportation Board with a policy resolution that outlined the specifics of this VRE policy. And those specifics are that the CTB will withhold 20% of VRE's funding each year if it fails to submit to the CTB its annual operating budget and proposed capital expenditures. 2, to determine the amount that we will give to VRE each year, we will use a set of performance metrics that measure ridership, cost efficiency, and reliability and safety. And then lastly, we will revisit these policies every 2 years. The plan is for the CTB to vote on these policy updates at its board meeting on September the 20th. Moving to the next slide, Washington Metro. So on slide 20, you'll see the specifics as it relates to the WMATA provisions of the bill from this past session. So it requires that local jurisdictions provide at least 50% of WMATA's annual subsidies. So I always give an example to explain this. Let's say that WMATA's budget says that Virginia has to supply $400 million annually towards the operating and capital for WMATA. The localities in Northern Virginia have to supply at least 200 of that 400 million. Any excess funds within the Commonwealth Mass Transit Fund past the 200 million will be returned to our transit statewide capital program. Some additional provisions in the bill. WMATA has to submit its proposed operating budget to the board by April 1 or be subject to withholdings. It adds additional requirements to WMATA's strategic plan. Specifically, these are the same requirements that the urban transit agencies across the state have to comply with. So WMATA now has the same requirements that GRTC, WADA, HRT have to do with their strategic plans. And then lastly, the WMATA GM and the Virginia Principal Board members of the WMATA board have to address the CTB annually, and they will be doing that next month in October at our meeting in Northern Virginia. So going to the next slide. This is a little bit just repetitive of what I just went over. This outlines what's going to be in the policy resolution that the board will vote on again next month at the September 20th CTB meeting. So moving to the next slide. Slide 23.
Hey, Andy, I got a question for you. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure when in the, and this is wonky, this is the WMATA world here. The presentation to the CTB by the Virginia board members, there are 2 principals or 2 alternates. Do we have it clear that it's just the 2 principals, or do the alternates also need to be there?
We will, at the resolution that we'll be submitting next month, it's going to be just the 2 principal board members.
That makes sense.
Alternate.
Yeah. That, thank you for making sure that's clear. And just for big picture, none of these things were surprising, and I appreciate the work that DRPT and others did in putting these things in the legislation. Historically, the state has given closer to 42% of funding to the localities, and we greatly appreciate every penny. So just big picture, the 50% is not an area where we are currently stressed out or anything like that. So
yeah, just to piggyback on that, I think in the last 5 years, there's only been one time where we crossed the 50% threshold, and that was a abnormal year. So yes, I agree with Kate, and NVTC was a great partner to us as we were drafting that legislation last fall and getting it ready. So going to slide 23, the Transit Ridership Incentive Program. So again, the changes are adding passenger amenities and facilities and crime prevention and public safety projects to the list of eligible projects that are available for funding. So just a quick second on the percentages here, because I sort of get confused myself on the percentages within the program. So the first 2, passenger amenities and crime prevention, up to 30% of the program. 0, reduced fare programs, up to 25% of the program. And then the remainder, at least 45%, will go to regional connectivity. And then the next slide just outlines the changes to the trip policy before the board again next month. Again, just repeat, adding 2 new sets of projects, expanding the areas where we can pull regional connectivity projects from. It's up to urban areas with a population greater than 100,000. And so with the latest census data, that added some new areas that will be eligible for those funds. And then we also made some changes to the scoring metrics for projects within the program. And if you all have any specific questions on that, I'll have to pass the baton to Zach to answer that. But I'm happy to answer any other questions.
Great. Thank you, Andy. Anybody have any questions for Andy? Okay, I guess not. Thank you again for that presentation. And now we'll go on to the fiscal year 23 no bus and bus facilities awards. And that's Grant.
All right. So switching gears just a little bit, we wanted to present to the group some good news on the federal discretionary front. Mary Olivia, if you can flip to the next slide, please. So as the group may recall, as part of the many policy changes that we brought to the CTB last fall, one of the things that we included for our capital program was an incentive for transit agencies to apply for federal discretionary funding for their capital projects. And this was a reaction to all this new money through IIJA/bill being introduced at the federal level for different types of projects. And we wanted to make the best use of our state money by encouraging transit agencies to go after this discretionary federal funding. And what we included in that policy language was any agencies that were successful in securing these federal discretionary awards would receive a reduced local match requirement. And so currently, for all of our capital projects, we require at least 4% local match. And so what we did with this policy change was if someone got a federal discretionary award, we would have the ability to lower that 4% local match, likely to 2%, but we kind of left that open-ended. So once that policy change was approved by the CTB, shortly thereafter, FTA announced their low-no and bus facilities discretionary programs. And we tried to be proactive by first letting every agency know that this new incentive had passed through the CTB. And then we also wanted to do some additional assistance in helping agencies write their grants to these their grant applications to these programs. So what you see here on the screen is a look back at federal discretionary awards through these 2 FTA programs. From you see on the far right what we were able to secure in FY23, and then federal fiscal year 23, and then the other bars show those previous 5 years. So I don't think we can take full credit for this. Certainly the stars did align in some areas. That purple shaded piece of the bar graph is WMATA. So they are usually very active in these discretionary programs, and they received a huge award this year for one of their Virginia facilities. So we wanted to include that here. But even the blue, which you can see underneath the purple, these are everyone with the exception of WMATA. And so we had some really great projects that were awarded through these 2 federal programs this year. And I think some of it probably should be credited to the policy change that the TSDAC group was able to push through. Next slide, please, Mary Olivia. So these are, I already touched on WMATA there at the bottom, the $104 million. That was for electrifying their Lorton facility. And again, that's in Virginia. But just kind of quickly running down the list here, these were the other non-WMATA projects. DRPT, we actually submitted an application of our own on behalf of 11 rural transit agencies. So when we received their applications to the Merit Capital program, we took out the oldest and most used buses that were rural in nature, and basically took those vehicles and applied through the Bus and Bus Facilities program. These rural transit agencies cannot apply to these programs on their own. They have to do it through DRPT. So this was our first time that I think we had ever just taken out some of these really old rural vehicles and applied to the FTA programs ourselves. And so we were able to secure $4.7 million for those 11 rural transit agencies. Loudoun County was able to secure almost $14 million for transitioning their fleet to CNG. And I believe that the $14 million includes both buses as well as infrastructure upgrades and some facility modifications to support CNG. Dash in Alexandria received almost $24 million for moving forward with their battery electric bus transition. And so similar to Loudoun County, the $24 million will go to both buses as well as facility upgrades and utility upgrades. And then the fourth one here on the list is HRT. They were able to secure $25 million for their Southside maintenance facility. Zach mentioned this earlier on, that HRT came in for major expansion through the merit process. We deemed it to be not quite ready. We believe it's a great project, but we wanted to see a little bit more on the readiness side. Luckily, the feds saw enough, and they were able to provide HRT with $25 million for that project. So we were really happy to see that. And then I had already touched on the WMATA project. So this is just good news that we wanted to present to the group. It does seem like our efforts have paid off. I think in total, we were able to get something like $170 million of these discretionary programs coming into Virginia, which I think breaks all the records from previous years. So happy to answer any questions if the group has any.
Okay. Do we have any questions for Grant on that presentation? If not, then let's move on to our last item on the agenda here, which is fiscal year 25 look ahead, and that's Zach once again.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this is just, we just wanted to take a note of a couple things just as we go into the new application period that'll be starting before we know it. We can look at the next slide. And nothing groundbreaking, just a few things to note. And then after I mention these real quick, we've done well on time. If there's anything that the members want to bring up about how the program is working well, or anything y'all are looking at, or whether you're hearing from anybody else, I think we're certainly open to hearing anything. So one thing we are doing that we've seen, and Grant was kind of alluding to, since the funding has changed and we've been able to, secure more for capital coming in, we're getting some larger projects. And so even on this side, we've needed to staff up and be able to vet some projects. We've got 2 engineers in-house now, and they help immensely in us being able to vet these projects, to kind of see where they're at, to make sure that money that we're putting into these is not going to be into something that doesn't get finished or doesn't move ahead for some reason. So even with that in mind, we're looking at, since we are doing more construction projects and even larger scale and complexity, of having somebody that's going to come in for something, come in with a pre-application period where we can look at the cost estimates, look at where they really are in things like design. And so we can know if it's more ready to move forward versus something that it's even a year or more away. And that is just something that we feel like would be a good use of our resources to establish that ahead of time. So that will be a little extra step in our process this year, fiscal year 25. As I mentioned earlier, the revenues available for operating allocation we are projecting will return to a more normal level after we had some additional carryover from all the federal and then, sort of a uplift from inflation and stuff like that for fiscal year 24. So just again, so that agencies and everybody else realizes that we're not necessarily cutting back. It's just sort of a fact that it's going to go back where it was because some of the revenue that was one-time revenues weren't available, except for that one time. So, and then, we talked a little bit about the VRE change, the direct allocation. We don't see this impacting the operating assistance available to other agencies outside of VRE because they were already getting some assistance anyway. And so, and the pie has grown some. So, and there's a 30% cap. So we think everybody will be kept whole. We certainly designed the program that way for working with them, but at the same time, VRE, it gives them some certainty in their operating funding. So we believe it was good, and we appreciate this committee's support of that as well. And also, applicants will be able to see this year, we're going towards a new grant management platform. Our current one has been good for years. It's rather customized, so the support of it is not there for something that we do need to make sure it can work for us. So we are looking to move towards a new grant management software system. So there'll be continuous training and work on that with our grantees and even with our internal staff to try to make that go. Try to make sure that goes as well as possible moving into fiscal year 25 when they'll be applying and ask for reimbursements, and we'll be managing from our side. So there's a few things going on. We feel like going into this next application period that will be starting just in a few months. And Mr. Chairman, with that, if there's any questions about anything we've talked about today, or if there's comments from the committee members about things, we all ears.
Well, thanks for the heads up, Zach. And I guess the only question I'd have is when would you expect that we might need to get back together again?
Yeah, I think certainly. Well, so I think certainly in the spring, as we do sometime again around March, just to kind of talk to you about where the where we're heading with projects coming in and things like that, and where the 6-year plan is. Is there any thoughts from the board we need to get together before then, or anything going on that's I don't think we foresee anything. So I think it would be the spring again.
Right. Okay.
Would be our thought.
That sounds fine. Anybody have any questions or comments you'd like to make now that we've gone through the agenda?
Only that maybe if you could maybe send around a summary of what happens at the CTB meeting in September up in Northern Virginia, so we know how things went and what kind of discussion they had related to the items that we're most interested in.
Well, I believe, Mr. Dye, I believe September we're meeting here in Richmond, and Andy can correct me on this. I think in October we're going to Northern Virginia.
October, yeah. Okay.
Yes,
okay.
October. Okay. Yeah, we'll anything y'all would like, we're certainly happy to respond.
Okay.
So, it's always good to hear maybe that the program, I wasn't here at the time, that you all worked so hard to kind of put into operation. We believe it's going well, and we've been continuously sort of trying to tweak and improve it. So if there's anything we're not seeing, we certainly welcome that feedback.
Well, a lot of members of this committee and former members of this committee put in an awful lot of effort, and it's good to see it working out well in terms of what's been happening here. Any other comments, questions?
Nope.
That's it. Okay. I understand that we're losing Neil's services after 45 years.
So yeah, I will, Neil, there he is.
Oh.
You're on mute though, Neil. You need to, we heard you earlier. You know, you were the one that was in.
Yeah, that was it. Sorry about that.
Well, congratulations
Thank
to you
you.
on your retirement. And is there some way we can get you a free bus pass for the rest of it?
That'd be nice, but you know, since we're prayer free, I think I'll be all right. So we'll go so much for out state. So
Well,
thank you.
thank you for your service.
It's been a great ride. Thank you.
Well, thanks so much for everybody's attention today, and Neil, congratulations again on
Thank
your
you
retirement.
very much.
And, yeah. Hope you have lots of good plans ahead.
Thank you.
With that, unless I hear anybody else who'd like to say anything, I will adjourn this meeting of the Transit Service Delivery Advisory Committee, and hope you will enjoy the remainder of this month and Labor Day weekend and a great fall.
Thank you,
Okay.
sir.
Thank you much, Mr. Chairman. Take care.
All right.
Take care,
bye-bye,
everybody.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Bye. Thank you.